World leaders arriving for the BRICS summit in Russia. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been seen, as you can see, landing at the host city of Kazan a short while ago. The summit of major emerging economies is a very public way for President Vladimir Putin to prove that Russia still has global allies, despite Western attempts to isolate it. Other prominent heads of state expected to attend are China's President Xi Jinping, as well as the Turkish, Iranian and Egyptian presidents. Our reporters are covering all the angles of the summit. Claire's here in London, but first we're going to Mark, who's live for us in Beijing. Obviously, the headline act here is China.
Absolutely, Max. In fact, in the last few minutes, we've now been receiving reporting from Chinese state media that Xi Jinping has indeed arrived in Kazan in Russia. And as we await for some of the substance of this meeting, there is certainly a lot of symbolism for Xi Jinping and for Vladimir Putin as well. But there's certainly this way, this method, this notion that Xi Jinping can promote this idea that not everyone in the world sees eye to eye with the United States, with NATO, and with the West, as evidenced by the long list of attendees at this summit. It's a way for Xi Jinping to really promote this idea that there is an alternative worldview to the West and that there are people supporting him. In fact, as we've reported, it is widely seen that Xi Jinping has really helped promote this idea of expanding the membership of BRICS. In fact, in recent months, we have seen the addition of Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Iran and Ethiopia to the roster. In addition, other nations have been invited to participate as well, kind of on the periphery of all of this. Among the big points that we are watching, particularly from the China side of things, is this plan, this potential plan from Brazil and China to try to promote a peace plan to end the war in Ukraine. It's a 6-point peace proposal that was unveiled last month, I should say, at the United Nations. It was not warmly received by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, but that is something that we may see. China has long tried to portray itself, at least, as this objective party in this war in Ukraine. And of course, too, we'll be anxious to see if there are any kind of face-to-face meetings between any of these heads of state that could include a possible meeting between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, a bilateral meeting. We have seen these two men meet frequently in recent months. Perhaps this backdrop in Russia will serve as another chance for Russia and China to have further conversations. Max.
Mark, thank you. Let's turn to Claire, who's joining us in the studio. Claire, this BRICS meeting is clearly an attempt for Vladimir Putin to validate himself on a global stage, to show that he can still summon support amidst global condemnation. But what, if anything, will this summit achieve this week? Any tangible things?
Yeah, I think that's the big question, because so far, I mean, the BRICS has yielded very little over the years of its existence in terms of actual deliverables. And I think, look, in terms of deliverables, the optics are really important. This is Russia, hosting the summit last year. He had to participate virtually because it was in South Africa, which is a signatory to the Rome Statute. Of course, we have the ICC arrest warrant out for Vladimir Putin, but he'll be the host. We see the leaders arriving on their planes. We're going to see a family photo. It really runs counter to Western efforts to isolate him. So I think it's worth emphasizing that. In terms of deliverables, the BRICS don't always agree on everything, but one thing they seem to be coalescing around is this desire to erode the dominance of the US dollar. So I think we're going to see some discussions of new different payment systems. Russia is pitching one called BRICS Pay, which could be an alternative to SWIFT, which of course many of its banks have been disconnected because of Western sanctions. Take a listen to how Putin pitched that.
We never refused the dollar as a universal currency. We were blocked from using it. Now 95% of all external trade of Russia, it is carried out with our partners in national currencies. They did all this with their own hands. They thought everything would collapse, but no, nothing collapsed. It's developing on a new basis.
So this is a more confident Putin that we see this year. His army has the initiative in Ukraine, albeit amid staggering losses. Some of the alliances that you see on display are helping his war effort, China and Iran, case in point. And it's an opportunity as well with the conflict in the Middle East to use the sort of lingering anti-US, anti-Western sentiment there as well to bring in more allies into this grouping and essentially build his coalition.
The Brits have taken a lot of Russian money, haven't they? Frozen it, handed it to Ukraine, and that's part of the latest aid deal.
So what the UK has done now is announced its contribution to basically a G7 plan to provide a $50 billion loan to Ukraine, which will be repaid using the windfall profits on Russian frozen assets. It's a little bit complicated, but this is how they've engineered it so that the Russian money isn't just sitting there earning interest while Ukraine is essentially running out of resources to fund its economy. So we don't know, we haven't got all of the loan in place yet, but this is the Brits' contribution. It'll be almost $3 billion, and it will be able to be used by Ukraine however they want. So obviously very much welcome going into winter when they have about a third of their energy producing, their electricity producing infrastructure still working. On top of that, of course, we got the US aid package as well announced during Lloyd Austin's visit yesterday, $400 million for weapons, and they expect, President Zelensky said, another $800 million to be funneled into Ukraine's own drone program. So we're seeing these commitments coming through from the West, but of course for Ukraine, the elephant in the room right now is the US election and what that means for the future of aid.
Not long now.
Just 2 weeks to go. Claire, Sebastian, thanks. Now, the former Soviet country of Moldova is a step closer to becoming part of the European Union. During a pivotal referendum, Moldovans voted to join the EU by an extremely narrow margin, with just 50.4% in favour.
In a separate vote, the country's pro-EU president failed to secure enough support for an outright majority and will face a runoff next month. CNN's Anna Stewart has been covering both these critical votes.
Moldova voted yes to the EU, but by a wafer-thin margin. It certainly wasn't the strong mandate that the incumbent President Maia Sandu had hoped for. She also didn't win an outright majority in the presidential election, which means she'll go for a second vote now on November 3rd. Speaking after the results came in, the incumbent president spoke about the controversy around a Kremlin-backed organization buying votes.
Ținta lor de a cumpăra 300.000 de voturi.
Their target of buying 300,000 votes, documented by state institutions, and paying 150,000 people to vote shows we must look closely at where mistakes were made and learn from this miserable attack on our sovereignty.
Moldova has long been torn between Russian and Western influence. Russia's invasion of Ukraine really galvanized the EU movement, and accession talks began in June of 2022. Now, these talks will continue, but the country appears divided, mired in corruption, which won't make the process any easier. Anna Stewart, CNN, London.